Hello, everyone. Oh my gosh, I'm still getting excuse me, pumped to my own music. But I'm so happy to be here, you guys. It's just such a fun time. I can tell you that I've been on this health journey of, I don't even know, just getting more minerals in my diet. And I am just loving it. I also feel like my audio, I fixed it. And I know y'all have been in the nicest way, politely bitching that it's been problematic. So hopefully this sounds better and is better. And if it's not, I can turn it up because I fixed the audio problem. So let me know. Anyway, John, Patrick, happy y'all are here. This is so exciting. So today, how do I say this? I'm only doing YouTube and X today because very online people, y'all will know what I'm referencing. But if you've never delved into the rabbit hole of transgender medicine, today is a great video for you. And we're not going to do it on any platforms that are going to censor this. Because what we're going to do is we're going to go through what is dubbed online as the WPATH Files. So this is my favorite thing in the world, not because I like what is happening to people at all. It's quite the opposite. I just find it fascinating. And I'm very excited to bring this to you. We'll get into that. Let me just explain to you what WPATH is. So if you don't know what WPATH is the World Professional Association for Transgender Health. And hence, WPATH is WPH, something? Yeah, acronym. That's what I'm trying to say. Anyway, it bills itself as this organization of doctors, of medical professionals, therapists, even though it really is just mostly composed of gender activists. We found that out actually pretty recently. I believe it was an underreported story that I talked about how this is an organization that bills itself as doing data on behalf of doing science, doing data, understanding the job of putting out medical care to people through the lens of doctors and medical professionals, when in actuality, this is all being done through the lens of gender activism. And WPATH, which they have this, just like plenty of other organizations have this, but they have an online Reddit thread of sorts where doctors and therapists can kind of talk back and forth with other gender affirming doctors and therapists about their clients. And this is, again, like I said, not abnormal to have for a profession when it comes to, doctors, healthcare providers. Of course, they want to solicit the advice, of other doctors and therapists, but their conversations are so outlandish that somebody actually went in there and was able to screenshot all of it, and it is just absurd. So back, it actually must have been almost exactly a year ago, I was working on a project with my former employer, and someone I met through this project had the WPATH files. So I've actually held these files in my hand. I've seen all of this before. And I knew I was working at the time at too small of an outlet to get this scoop. I tried so hard, guys. I thought I was this close. But I knew the source. I knew that person's motivations. And I knew that they wanted the WPATH files to go to someone that was more liberal than myself. And I didn't fight it because it's really, at the end of the day, this has never been about me. It's about getting the information out. I just feel I was a good conduit at the time to do it. Regardless, a journalist named Michael Schellenberger, who's done great work on debunking radical climate activism, he got his hands on the WPATH files, and he's really laid it out in a way that makes sense. So today, we're going to go through the WPATH files and expose the nation's most corrupt industry. You guys ready for this? I know it's kind of like a scary, dark day, but I want to go through it because it's so important, and that's what I want to spend the next 30 minutes on. I've pulled a bunch of pages that I think are worthy of our time and attention. I don't even have prepared analysis. I just want to go through it with you guys. So let's start, I believe, page 6. This is a brief history of everything that's going on with the WPATH files. So, oh no, don't do that to me. Page 6. Thank you very much. So this is a brief history of transgender medicine in the early days of WPATH. So I don't want to go too into this because I kind of gave you, I think, a very good brief of the WPATH, but there are a few parts that I'm sure as I skim this, I'm going to find very important. And yeah, I mean, I can already see a few, but I'm just going to make sure that I'm not missing anything. Gotcha. So essentially the idea behind a lot of WPATH, like a brief history of this, is that transgender medicine was in its initial abilities or in its initial form experimented on children. And that is, of course, incredibly frightening. So that's, I just think, a key point that we would like to, we have to keep in touch with. So this is where I really wanted to go to. This is what I thought I was pulling up the first time. Sorry. This is about how WPATH has misled the public. So like I said, WPATH, it advocates for minors to have access to gender-affirming care. And let's just point that out there. WPATH advocates for minors, not just for your 40-year-old uncle that thinks he's a woman. It is advocating for minors to have access to gender-affirming care, right? And we're going to see that a lot in some of these pages. But this is an organization that, like I said, bills itself as like this transgender mecca of health guidance, when it's not actually done by people in health. And what's important to know is that they believe that, like it says right here, the self-declared transgender identities are what we're supposed to use as the way in which we know whether somebody is transgender or not. It's just self-identification of a minor, which is disturbing, right? I mean, incredibly disturbing. It goes on to say that WPATH advises healthcare providers to use the WHO, which we don't trust post-COVID, their international classification of diseases, so that's the ICD, classification of gender incongruence over the DSM-5's gender dysphoria. This recommendation, it says here, it's motivated by the fact that the ICD-11 diagnosis is categorized as a condition related to sexual health and not a mental disorder. So why I bring this up, why this is so important to differentiate before we really delve into some of the more insane portions of this, is I just want you to have a baseline understanding of what's going on here. The WPATH, which is, again, tasked with not just providing the care, but doing the work of like the billing, the insurance, letting people know whether or not they can or cannot get qualified for this care. What they're doing here when it comes to asserting that they were going to use the ICD-11 classification of gender incongruence is that they're saying, hey, what we actually want is we're going to say that this is some sort of disease. It's related to sexual health. It's related to sexual wellness. So we're going to classify this among like women's reproductive rights, like abortion rights, other stuff like that. We're going to classify gender dysphoria with that as opposed to gender dysphoria in the DSM-5, which is what American institutions use, which is this is a mental health issue, because then they can't skirt around these different, it's very difficult to get surgery. It's very difficult to get hormones, cross-sex hormones, all that kind of stuff when you are classifying it under the DSM-5, which is how we classify things. So you have to see that this is what WPATH does is it's very meticulous. It's not just, very simple. We see in plain sight what you're doing. What they're doing is they're just changing the definition to a different definition so that they can skirt around all these rules to make sure that people are getting the healthcare that they perceive to be right, even, as we will get to, if it's not right. Alex, I seen you join the chat. Welcome, friend. Today we're talking about the WPATH files, the vaunted WPATH files. So I want to bring you guys back to WPATH files here. This is a very important point as well. WPATH is not a scientific group, okay? They're going to say they're a scientific group. They are not. I just really liked the way that this was all laid out, so I want to read it to you so that you guys can, again, get a little bit more background on this. So WPATH presents itself to the world as a scientific organization. The group describes its, quote, standards of care, which, again, if you're like a person that's just looking at WPATH and you're like, oh, they have like a standards of care. They have these different classifications of gender dysphoria versus like they're so well versed in this. Of course, they're doing the right thing. It's just kind of like naturally how we work as humans. Like we see forms of legitimacy and then we're like, yeah, that's legit. I'm just going to like go with that. No, terrible idea. In 2022, in a 2022 speech in Texas, the U.S. Assistant Secretary for Health, Admiral Rachel Levine, who is a biological male, said that WPATH's approach to medicine is, quote, free of any agenda other than to ensure the medical decisions are informed by scientists. And then in an op-ed in the New York Times from April of 23, WPATH President Bowers argued that the field of transgender medicine is evolving rapidly, but it is every bit as objective and outcome-driven as any other specialty in medicine. However, that is not at all what this is about. This is not what WPATH is doing. The WPATH files, as stated, contain abundant evidence that the world-leading transgender health group does not respect the well-established scientific process. Y'all, we learned about the scientific process in elementary school, I believe. It was like hypothesis, do the science, see the conclusion is like real short and sweet what it was. And the problem is what WPATH, what a lot of organizations are doing, and you can't just blame it on WPATH. I got to say, this is a resounding indictment on a lot of medicine, is they have a hypothesis, they then do the experiment, pull portions of the experiment that fit their hypothesis, and then get their conclusion to fit their hypothesis. That is what WPATH does in a short and sweet answer. And that is what we're seeing through the WPATH files. I don't know why this isn't zooming back out. Okay, I hear you beeping at me. It's not zooming back out, so sorry, y'all. Anyway, let's move on to the other page I wanted to pull up. This was WPATH is not a medical group. Again, you guys, that they've pulled themselves as a form of legitimate people. Oh, sorry. And they have been claiming that they're a bunch of physicians, doctors. Again, I feel like I've primed you adequately about what these people are doing. They are not a medical group. They are a bunch of activists getting together claiming that they have these really high standards for care, when in fact that is far from what they're actually doing. All right, I want to move on now to page 37, which is that WPATH, I loved this little portion. WPATH has no respect for medical ethics, okay? You can see it right above me. They do not. Traditional medical ethics is more than just first do no harm, okay? The guiding principle of Hippocratic medicine is that illness places the afflicted into a compromised state against their will and preference, okay? That is very specific. Let's go through that again. Traditional medical ethics is more than just don't harm people. The guiding principle of Hippocratic medicine is that illness, any kind of illness, be it an illness that you elicit with the definition you elicit from the ICD-11 or the DSM-5, okay? Illness of any form places a person into a compromised state against their will and preference. These people do not want to be in this state, they just are. When you guys feel like I've given you an adequate enough amount of background information, will you just hop in the chat, let me know that you feel good. I feel like you guys are good, but I just want to be positive that I've given you kind of just enough background information so we can hop into the actual files. But I want to keep reading a little bit more of this. It was very interesting because it's about the ethics of informed consent, and you can't really see it from how I have everything set up. But let's see. I could just shrink this maybe. You can now see my screen. That's totally fine. I don't care. Yes, let's go right here. So, my very cool screen of just a calendar. So this is the ethics of informed consent. Informed consent in medicine is the process by which a healthcare healthcare provider educates a patient about the risks, benefits, and alternatives of a given procedure or intervention. The patient must be competent to make a voluntary decision about whether to undergo the procedure or intervention. And again, this is one other thing I just think is so important to highlight, okay? Because informed consent is lacking when it comes to everything that WPATH is providing. Like we mentioned above, right here, if the guiding principle is that compromised people, ill people, are in pain, they want to be healed, the answers that you want to give people, they can be whatever answers you want. I think a very simple one is, obviously very nuanced, but also very simple just for the example purposes, is abortion. I'm pregnant. I don't want this baby. Now, it is your job as a doctor to give me informed consent about all the things. You could have your baby. You could have your baby and put it up for adoption. You could, I'm not saying you should, nor would I ever recommend this, get an abortion. And then I would say, hey, this is the impact of having a kid. It's a financial stress. This is the impact of, adopting your kid out. Your kid will likely live with an identity wondering, where's my mom? What was my real backstory? Blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of problems with that. Abortions, you're going to lead to the fact that you murdered your kid, okay? The point of me saying all of this was to say, there's a process in which you lay out all the options, and then there's a process in which you inform people of the outcomes, good and bad, of both sides without a preference. And that is the ethics of informed consent. And the patient has to be competent in order to take in any of this information, right? Like I could tell you all these things about, gender dysphoria, your diagnosis, and I could give you 18 different options on what we want to do with you and what I would do if this was my child and blah, 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 blah. But if the person in front of me, the person being operated on, the person taking hormones, the person taking puberty blockers, if they are not competent to make a voluntary decision about whether to undergo the procedure or intervention, it is not a good idea, okay? So I say that to say that obtaining informed consent in medicine is a process that should include a lot of different components. The three that they lay out in the WPATH report is the provision of accurate, up-to-date information regarding the nature of the condition, the proposed treatment, and all available alternatives, like I just laid out. Second, an evaluation of the patient's understanding and, when applicable, the caregiver's understanding of the presented information, right? So we're not co-opting, we're not forcing people into believing that what I tell you is fact. I'm just providing you the information, and you now have the ability to make the decision, and I want to make sure that you understand it to the fullest extent. So if you have questions, I can give you honest answers. Are puberty blockers reversible? No, they are not. But doctors will say, yes, they are. Or in some cases they are. Or on their FDA label they are. They will purposely mislead. And that's what we're going to see further on in the WPATH files. So all of that, I said all of that. I did all of this research, whatever, to pull you into the actual pictures of the WPATH files. So I'm going to pull up some of these photos and we're going to go through them because some of them are frickin' bats. Absolutely bats. So this first one. This one says, surgical or healthcare complications. A WPATH member reports their concerns regarding their patient's urethral ejaculate. Okay. Not that I want to be talking about this either, guys, but this is on their discussion page. And this is the actual WPATH files that, again, like I said, tangibly held, read. This says, hi, everyone. I have a transgender patient who underwent full-depth vaginoplasty a year ago. So he. So it's a biological boy who inverted his penis into himself. She notices an ejaculate with orgasm, though her urethra that, quote, smells like semen is bothersome. Oh my gosh, this is very graphic. I apologize. But although I am a gynecologist, I assume this is residual prostatic secretion. Is there a solution? I have asked her surgeon as well if he has heard of this. So we're talking full-blown medical malpractice in the fact that kids are being told, adults as well, kids and adults are being told, this may very well be an adult, probably likely is, an adult that receives information that it's going to be great, we're going to invert your penis into yourself and you're going to have a vagina. That is literally what doctors are telling patients. That is not the truth. Look at this. You're seeing all the complications laid out because, of course, there is a penis inverted into this person. And I think some of the most important information that we're going to take from the WPATH files is the responses. So this is a doctor who says all the anatomic structures that produce semen are still present after vaginoplasty. Typically, people experience the greatest change in their production when they start estrogen and block testosterone. After vaginoplasty, the muscles to expel the fluids are gone, so the fluid won't come out as quickly. But they will likely still have the same volume of fluid. To my knowledge, there's no surgeon in the world that removes prostate and seminal vesicles at the time of vaginoplasty, too invasive and risk of untreatable urinary incontinence. I don't think there is a remedy. There we go. That's what it is. I don't think there's a remedy. So you're going on, you have people talking about this massive problem, again, sold to people as this is a surgery that's done time and time again. We do this all the time. This is how to treat patients. And then you come out at the bottom going, I don't think there's a remedy to this. Doctors looking at this and going, I don't think there's anything we can do to fix this because this is the result of the surgery. But again, these people are not informed of this, right? These people are told, of course, the risk. Of course, I don't want to delineate, or I don't want to, go off course and say, oh, the doctors don't tell you anything. Of course, there are going to be some issues that arise, and I'm sure that the doctors are transparent about that. Where they're not transparent is they say, getting this surgery will fix your mental, cognitive, or otherwise, whatever you want to call it, your sexual health problems. And when in reality, what we see is that it creates a whole litany of other problems, right? There's another one I wanted to pull up. This one is a WPATH member discusses the development of Hepatic Ed. I'm not even going to try to say it. Essentially, I looked it up. It's just tumors, not just, but it's tumors on a client taking testosterone and estrogen. This one reads, this is December 1st, dated December 1st, 2021, and it reads, hi, colleagues and friends. Wondering if anybody else has had to navigate the development of, I'm just going to say tumors, in a young person treated with testosterone and or oral contraceptive. Without getting into too many patient-specific details, our team has a 16-year-old patient who was on, I'm not going to try and say that, but some sort of drug for several years for menstrual suppression. So we know that the 16-year-old patient is a biological woman who was on testosterone for slightly over 1 year. Patient found to have 2 liver masses. So 2 tumors, 11 by 11 and 7 by 7 centimeters. And the oncologist and surgeon have both indicated that the likely offending agent are the hormones and have recommended the treatment ceases at the time to allow the regression of the masses. We are prepared to support the patient in any way we can. IUD, top surgery when medically stable, etc. However, we are wondering if others have to experience this situation. There's so much to go through. Oh my gosh. Okay. Let's take it bit by bit. Hi, friends. Basically, my patient has tumors. And the result of this is because, the surgeons have both agreed that the problem of this was the hormones and probably the cross-sex hormone coupled with the synthetic hormone. Because as much as I want to make this, I don't want to, but as much as this is an issue about transgenderism, this is also an issue about pumping synthetic testosterone and synthetic estrogen into your body. Any synthetic hormone, it's garbage for you. Get it off. Get off birth control, ladies. It's shit for you. Anyway, goes on to say that they want to keep treating this woman or this girl. She's 16 years old, but we can't treat her because she's got tumors on her body, but we're also prepared to treat her. So how they're going to treat her is getting her either an IUD, which again, those are hormonal as well. That's pumping her through with hormones. It's just not an oral contraceptive. It's a contraceptive that gets shoved up you. And even, people, the haters are going to be like, oh, but Chrissy, they have non-hormonal IUDs. Yeah, okay, cool. They're made of they're made of toxic copper. Congratulations. You have copper toxicity in your body. Is that what you want? No. Okay. Goes on to say, we're also going to give this girl top surgery after we've pumped her through with cross-sex hormones, put her on synthetic hormones, given her tumors. Now we're going to say, don't worry, honey. As soon as your tumors shrink, we're going to cut your boobs off. Okay. And then they're wondering, have other people experienced this situation? Oh my gosh. Then let's read this response. It's just like a couple months later, a month and a half later. I saw the two dates out with the 2021 to the 2022. I was like, oh, wow, that's a long time. Nope, not at all. Just a month like 3 months later. I have one transition friend colleague who after about 9 to 10 years of testosterone developed tumors. To the best of my knowledge, it was linked to his hormonal treatment. He was in his midlife. Unfortunately, I don't have much more details since it was so advanced that he opted for palliative care and died a couple months later. Now, I think this is the dirty little secret about transgender care that people don't like to talk about. And that is that it is very rare that people who opt to transition die of natural causes. There are so many problems with these surgeries that people opt to take their own life, which is so tragic, or complications from these problems arise to the point where we need to be able to help these people get back. But surgeons, they're not really as interested. And this isn't my opinion. This is the experience lived out by a lot of detransitioners. And speaking of experience, this one really caught my eye as part of the WPATH files. This one reads, a WPATH member reports a patient who reports feeling brainwashed into transition. Now, this is how a lot of people who were detransitioners feel, or on the cusp. They partially transitioned, but transitioned to the point, I guess, that you can transition. Partially transitioned to the point where they realized, oh crap, I'm in way too much over my head. I do not want to be a part of this, right? So this says a WPATH member, like I said, reports feeling brainwashed. This says help support for patient that chose to detransition. We have a patient, 17-year-old, female to male, which is, I'm not going to go off on why that's a ridiculous thing to say. So it's a biological female who once believed that she was a male, just graduated from high school and has decided to detransition. We have seen we have seen her. So still using the old pronouns. I thought that was transphobic, to my knowledge. Anyway, we have seen her for years, followed all the guidelines. She's legally changed her name and gender and has been on testosterone for 2+ years. She is very distraught and angry. She reports that she feels she was brainwashed and is upset by the permanent changes to her body. No fucking shit. Obviously, when you put somebody who is 15 years old at the time, who has this belief that they are a different person, a different identity, etc., you do this to people and you're putting them in a very compromising situation. He reports that he feels he was brainwashed. I'm going to see that in my sleep at night, and is upset by the permanent changes to his body. Her body, I should say. Of course. I would feel the same way. I'd be livid if somebody was doing this to me and I came to it later. Do you know what I mean? I didn't realize what was happening to me in the moment. Of course I would. I'm sure you would too. Anyway, I want to keep reading this. It says, He has tried to find support in online and local communities and finds it so toxic and full of hate on both sides that, she feels further isolated. Yes, it's called glitter family bombing or something along those lines, and it's toxic. Goes on to say, he doesn't trust the therapeutic process and feels his therapy visits are counterproductive. This has happened so suddenly and at a transitional period in her life, finishing high school, along with abrupt cessations of hormones. There are likely other issues at play. Is anyone aware of support sites/communities that might be a supportive environment for them to explore their feelings about their gender? Oh my gosh, these pronouns, I can't keep up with it. Per mom, they are feeling very validated by right-wing groups and Matt Walsh. Oh my gosh. They are feeling very validated by right-wing groups and Matt Walsh. Does anyone have experience with this in clinic or advice to offer? Thanks in advance. Maybe you should listen to your patients. And if they feel uncomfortable with the treatment you're giving them because it's terrible and they're starting to identify with the likes of Matt Walsh, they've woken up. They're seeing reality for what it is, right? Someone responded and said, "Hello, and thanks for bringing it out. Our team is following a patient willing to detransition. The patient has undergone vaginoplasty. She is determined to undergo reversion surgery, and we would like to know if any other team has experienced this." It goes on to say, I have a patient I am currently seeing in psychotherapy who is also in high school and medically at least has opted to pursue a similar path. However, throughout the discussion of this change in course with me and with his parents, I don't know what that means. He is framing it quite differently. Instead of using the term detransition, he's simply describing this as a turn in his gender journey. He does not regret the course he has taken so far and acknowledges that he was the driver in getting him to this point. He also has had a very supportive environment, home, school, friend therapy, and has allowed him to appreciate his ability to have agency in his journey. He simply said that, for now at least, he needs to take a break, pause the tea, and see how that feels to him. E.g., it will make him feel gender congruent. Another one reads, maybe this young person needs to engage in trans platforms as a place where she, pronouns, can connect with her anger and feel less alone. The isolation you describe is pretty typical, I think, which is why I'm considering starting a support group if there are enough people interested in joining. Oh, there are thousands and thousands of people who would be interested in joining because they have been wronged by this. Anyway, it goes on to say, I worked with a 16-year-old who detransitioned after being on T for more than 2 years and having top surgery. She was very angry and actively engaged in anti-trans online groups to her case, as well as with the 20-year-old I am currently working with. They believe the issue was really body dysmorphia rather than gender dysphoria, and both had presented as very appropriate for hormones and surgery. All of this to say what I said at the very beginning. These files really do showcase, and there's so much more, but I don't have time to get to it. My camera batteries will die. I just don't have time. All this to say, it's incredibly problematic what organizations are doing in the name of health. They're taking what we know as regular health, medicine, and instead they're transitioning it into activism. And that's exactly what we see. I think the last example was really good at putting a point on this, is that it wasn't about what the patient wanted. It was about pursuing the agenda. And now we've seen countless cases of kids self-identifying with a transgender identity, going back and saying they regret it, and we're not doing anything about the process of self-identification is enough, right? There's another portion of this WPATH Files that I didn't have time to get to that talks about how if you don't give kids access to this, you are gatekeeping medical care from them, when in actuality, gatekeeping medical care is one of the best things that you could possibly do to a lot of these kids. Otherwise, they land in a series of regrets. And of course, with this, I would like to caveat and say, of course, there are stories of relative success. But I say that there are stories of relative success because they are successful in the moment. On average, detransition takes about 6 years. So if we're looking down the timeline, there might be a lot more people in 3, 4, 5, 6 years who come out and regret this. And I just think that doctors need to be more careful about it. And the WPATH files really go to show how meticulous these organizations are in skirting around the laws that we have and skirting around normal processes for medical care to ensure that people are getting life-altering diseases, life-altering surgeries. It's very sad. It really is. And I truly mean it when I say that this is the most corrupt industry I have ever seen. That's all we have time for. I really hope you guys enjoyed this whole deep dive. I know it's very different from what I usually do on my live streams, a little more serious, diving into the WPATH report. But I had a blast going through it with you guys, trying to understand it. And I'll be back next Wednesday. If you want more Chrissy, if you like underreported stories, which is what it's my thing, you know, you can always download my podcast, subscribe to my underreported stories Substack. Wherever you want to find me, there's links in my bio to get more access to all of the things we're going to talk about. And I do talk about the WPATH files a ton in this week's underreported stories. So be sure to hop on Apple Podcasts, go check that out. Leave a 5-star review about how beautiful, stunning, funny I am. I had a blast doing this. Thank you so much for indulging me in my passion. And I will see you back here on Wednesday. Mwah. I love you guys.